You know, I'm really looking forward to playing this old classic on the PC. I played it on the PlayStation all those years ago, and now I finally have an opportunity to play it on the PC. I picked it up a few days ago, and yeah, finally gonna. Ah yeah, just a Steam key. These new games don't have discs anymore. So after 3 attempts, the game is launching. Great. Alright, start that game. Great. Can you please give me a main menu?
You know what really grinds my gears? When you buy a game and it doesn't work. I am not talking about a few bugs, or your computer lacking the required hardware. No, I am talking about games that suit your hardware perfectly, or your hardware even exceeding the minimum requirements by far, and still you're confronted with a game refusing to launch. When I buy a game on Steam, or a key from a retailer like in the beginning of the video, I only have a few demands. First, the key must be valid. Second, the Steam release should be supplied with the latest patches. And third, the game must run on a contemporary system. If you tell me specifically, hey, this game is old, not made for modern computers, that's okay. But if you put up an old game in current year with no warning, I kind of expect it to be compatible with Windows 10. I have come across a plethora of broken games on Steam. A few years ago I talked about the utter ineptitude Valve displayed with the unmonitored Steam Greenlight system, and how it was used by con artists to outright scam unsuspecting customers out of their money. Asset flip is one of the keywords that comes to mind there. And yeah, Valve has rectified the problem and Steam Greenlight is gone. The situation has gotten slightly better meanwhile. But that is not what I want to talk about today. A slightly different issue is on the agenda today. Big studios providing outright broken games. THQ's and later Sega's Dawn of War is a nice example for a somewhat broken Steam release. Up until recently, Dawn of War Soulstorm was missing image files, texts, and scripts for the 2 armies provided in the game, rendering the 2 new armies from the expansion pack almost unplayable. Brilliant. Great fun to play, it works. Barely. This is only a minor annoyance compared to this. Games that outright refuse to launch on your operating system. The aforementioned Steam Greenlight scammers sold games that did not ship with an executable file. Other companies, even reputable ones, release old games on Steam in, for example, 2019, and of course with an executable, but that executable does not run on a modern Windows platform. Is it too much to ask for to have a game sold in 2019 run properly on a modern operating system like Windows 10? No, it is not. Old strategy classics like Earth 2150 outright refuse to launch. The third standalone add-on at least does launch, but is prone to crashing frequently. So beware when you buy it. Of the 3 games provided in the pack, only 1 works properly. To be fair, it has been on Steam for some time now, but for a game that just recently got a digital deluxe release update, that is unacceptable. I was relegated to experiment with virtual machines and compatibility modes, which is anything but a pleasant gaming experience. That definitely dampened the nostalgia trip for me. And here comes the thing that prompted me to make this video. I played the old 3D era classic Grand Theft Auto games when they were released for the PS2 in the early 2000s. Now, over 15 years later, I thought of replaying them on the PC, with pretty enhancement mods that worked perfectly fine for good old Vice City as well as San Andreas. Although the latter one runs a lot better with mods. The vanilla Steam version of San Andreas is somewhat buggy, which is a bit baffling when they indeed had the retail version fixed up. After I replayed Vice City and San Andreas, I thought it was time for the OG experience, and I fired up GTA 3 only to find myself in a main menu screen with no visible text. Amazing. My first instinct was to just launch the game blind. I remembered where to click. Once in the game, the menu screen was clearly visible, but that was no good to me since you couldn't change the resolution that way. Next step, launching the game on Windows XP compatibility mode. The menu became visible, I changed the resolution, and played for a good 2 minutes until the game froze on the first loading screen. So the next attempt was started. I remembered I once played this game on a PC with Windows Millennium Edition, so I fired up the game in ME compatibility mode. It still froze. Next up, Windows 2000 compatibility, and the game works fine until now, with the caveat that the menu needs a few seconds to load properly. And after the game was running fine, I started experimenting a bit. My graphics card supports dynamic super resolution, like, you run a 4K resolution on a Full HD screen. With regular Full HD settings, the menu looks like this. It takes a while for everything to load. But when I choose a resolution that is way higher than my actual monitor resolution, the game works perfectly fine. Usually old games struggle with resolutions of this size. This one loves it, apparently. So up until now, I am pretty happy with the game. A great nostalgia trip. But I was told to be careful and to use several different save games and not to overwrite the same one again and again, because the game reportedly has a tendency to corrupt save files, resulting in loading errors and all cars being pitch black. But not only Steam has such problems, Origin has similar ones. If you download the first Crysis game on Origin, it won't start if you press the play button. The screen gets black, the game crashes, and you are back to your desktop. But if you go into the installation folder, go into the 64-bit folder, and manually start the 64-bit Crysis executable, the game launches without any problems. This little issue could be fixed by an Origin developer within 5 minutes, but nothing has been done so far. I've even contacted the Origin support more than 5 times, but I didn't even get an answer. But yeah, what did I expect from Origin? The last thing I want to address is a rather positive example of old games being re-released on Steam, because I thought, well, you should also say something positive. Pandemic's original 2004 Star Wars Battlefront, the very first one, appeared on Steam not too long ago, which was a surprise to be sure, but a welcome one. For the second episode of the cut content of Star Wars Battlefront, I dug up my old copy of the very first Star Wars Battlefront game for PC. Surprisingly, it worked fine, with the exception of the resolution not being adequate for a modern PC screen. And as a result of the rather high frame rate my computer was able to provide, the vehicle physics were rather hilarious. But not too well playable, especially with bots. In contrast, for the re-release on Steam, the game has actually been adjusted for modern requirements. Resolutions of up to 4K are possible, but on maps with water, they lead to visual errors, as you can see right here. So yeah, not everything is great, but at least the game works. But more importantly, the physics bugs have been fixed, making the game a very enjoyable play. Oddly enough, the very first Battlefront game does have a bigger appeal to me, even outside the nostalgia factor. The first game does provide a denser battlefield atmosphere, at least in my opinion, since the slightly arcadey nature of the playable heroes does not exist. And yes, of course, the amount of content is far bigger in Battlefront 2, making it the superior product. But simply the gameplay itself, at the core, it is better with the first Battlefront game, in my humble opinion. You feel free to disagree there. In addition, it should be noted, the intellectual property that Star Wars Battlefront revolves around was never owned by the developer. This is a licensed game being re-released over a decade after the initial launch, which in itself is remarkable. Games that rely on a license usually do not prove such longevity in regards to developer support or even basic availability in stores. A great example would be the Tony Hawk series of skating games. It is undebatable the Pro Skater games represent an absolute classic of the PlayStation 1 era, and spawned off a plethora of spin-offs like Underground 1 and 2, American Wasteland and so on. These arcade-style skating games used to be incredibly popular, so before the license with the eponymous Mr. Hawk ran out, Activision pushed out one final Tony Hawk game, Pro Skater 5. Banking on name recognition and the nostalgia factor of the old games, this was a rushed attempt of a cash grab. A broken game on release that then was attempted to be fixed with a plethora of patches that did not resolve the majority of game-breaking issues. Tony Hawk Pro Skater 5 is the very essence of a bad licensed game, although I'm sure you can find even worse examples out there. And I know it is a console game, yet its predecessor, Tony Hawk Pro Skater HD, was not much better, and that game was indeed released for the computer, the PC. And just like the console players, PC customers were presented with a broken game on release, which was then attempted to be fixed with a plethora of patches that did not resolve the majority of game-breaking issues, just like it was with Pro Skater 5. Pro Skater HD has subsequently been abandoned by the developer and pulled from the Steam store. This whole thing is pretty sad because the franchise had a promising start, but it does serve as a great comparison to Star Wars Battlefront and makes it obvious why the Steam release is such a welcome surprise. As a little side note, try to get your hands on a copy of Pro Skater HD for PC. You can't. Even though the game is not that great, it is still a part of gaming history, which is very hard to preserve. As regular viewers of this channel know, I am very much interested in keeping old games alive to record their history, which makes me an advocate for games sold on physical media. Games that are being sold exclusively online are always at the risk of getting lost over time. And yes, this does indeed apply to our beloved Steam. All of the games discussed today are in essence great games. When they work, they are amazing. Simply the way in which they are being re-released, especially the first two games' compatibility issues with modern systems, dampen the excitement. With the exception of the last two Tony Hawk Pro Skater games, I guess. Something one should consider is, who is the potential customer? None of the games I spoke of, in particular Grand Theft Auto, are aimed at an expert or enthusiast audience, with the exception of maybe Earth 2150. One cannot expect every user to be able to fix compatibility issues. A casual user is potentially overwhelmed with a problem like that, especially if a game requires a virtual machine to run properly. As said before, many of these small issues that still break the game could be fixed with relative ease. And if a product is on sale in 2019, it is not too much to ask for to have it run properly on a contemporary operating system. Funnily enough, the company who owns the platform where many of these problematic games are being sold is capable of keeping their games up to date with modern systems. Every Gold Source game that is being sold on Steam runs on a modern operating environment. Then again, Valve is the company that broke Half-Life Source with so-called updates, stunting the usability of the multiplayer mode with massive entity errors. But that's a topic for another day, since that would push the length of this video way too much. But hey, at least the game runs on a contemporary system. This concludes today's video, a list of complaints about amazing games which are unfortunately being held back by bugs, errors, the developer's ineptitude, or frankly, their own age. Have you experienced similar issues before? If so, feel free to share them in the comment section down below. And if you found a workaround, share that too. You know, it's somewhat entertaining. Just after I recorded this video, and I even somewhat applauded Valve for having decreased the amount of trash on their store, I came across this. Someone just stealing Battlefield 1942. So yeah, Valve, you still have a few battles to fight. Not only are broken games still a problem, but also people advertising outright stolen content without anyone noticing before it goes live. Pretty embarrassing for Steam, I would say. And yeah, in the end, please don't tell me that the Epic Game Store will be any better. I've already seen some trash on there. They are just like any other storefront. When it gets bigger, more trash gets on there. Just like Origin, Steam, just like all the other prominent online stores for video games. With the exception of GOG, of course, because they are the good old games. They recently fixed a 13-year-old bug for Far Cry 1 that let the enemies shoot through tents, which was pretty good, I assume, but like all real gamers, I prefer to buy my games on Discord. Who buys their game on Discord? Okay, jokes aside, I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, consider dropping a like and all the stuff, but also maybe join our Discord server, especially if you enjoy creating maps for video games, which is just something I would like to see more there, because the stuff I've seen so far on the ESCalation Discord server is pretty interesting. Also, a special thanks to our supporters on Patreon, who of course got to see this video first. I am tremendously thankful. With your support, I was able to fix my microphone. So, all the links to our Patreon, our Twitter, and of course our Discord server are in the video description down below. Until then, have a nice day, and as always, goodbye and guten Tag.
Well, this became remarkably calm in the end. Well, anyways. Prost.